A few days ago, I posted a video on Instagram and TikTok where I played this groove. And I asked you guys if you could guess the time signature it's played in. Now, a few guesses came in, and two people guessed it right. So yeah, it's well, actually, it uses two time signatures. The first three bars are in 7/4, and it finishes off with two bars of 4/4. And there were a few curious people who wanted to know about this groove a little bit better. So I promised to make a more in-depth video on it, breaking down the whole thing. I'll show you the whole process, how I created it, breaking down every little detail. So hopefully at the end you will all be able to understand. So the first thing we will do is set the tempo to 182, and we will make three bars of 7/4 here, followed by two bars of 4/4. Now, how did I come up with this insanity? I got a riff from one of my band's guitarists, and the whole drum groove is based on that. Unfortunately, I can't show you that riff because it's for a song we are working on and it has not been released yet. So you'll have to trust me on that when I say that the kick drum pattern is following the rhythm of the guitar riff. So let's do all of the kick drums first. Okay, so these are all the kick drum hits. As you can see, we have a pattern here, a repeating pattern, which is almost the same for all four repetitions. Think of it as four repetitions of the same thing, in which every 7/4 bar is one repetition, and the last repetition is 1/4 note longer than the first three are. So we just fill in the last fourth note worth of space with the extra kick drum hits. Currently, it sounds something like this. Currently, it sounds a little bit boring, so let's spice it up a little by changing something about it. Now, you should know that the first six notes of every measure, the guitar is just chugging along. So just simple palm muted chugging. And the other half, it's played wide open and there's some kind of melody in there. So what I decided to do was that when that melody happens, I double the last six notes. Of course, the 4/4 variation, the last eight notes, like so. Already much more interesting. So next up, we add all the other instruments I hit. Let's start with the China because that one's the easier, and let's leave the snare drum for the end. Now I had a few options here where to put the China hits. The most obvious being all of the quarter notes, but I thought I'm a little bit more trickier than that. So I decided to accent the first notes of these chugs, and then in the rest of the measure I decided I will go with this pattern here, which means they are positioned every 3/8 notes, like so. All of these are equal distances from each other except for the last China hit and the first China hit of the following measure, because 4/16 notes equals only 2/8 notes. This gives the whole groove a sort of unevenness, but let's talk about the 4/4 version a little bit. When the listener gets to this part, they will most probably get used to this kind of pulse. So let's change it up. I will only accent every half note right here. here and here. And lastly, let's add the snare hits. Now, what I was sure about is that I want to hit the snare in this position and this position because the guitars at this part are playing in sort of a triplet feel, but I don't want to say triplets because they aren't triplets really. They're playing six notes, and the first one and the fourth one are accented. So I'm accenting those accented guitar notes with the snare. So in every measure, the snare positions are here. And in the last repetition, the other half of the riff is elongated, so 4 and 4 with the first one being accented. But there are snare hits in the first halves of every measure too, which again I could have done the same thing, accenting the first notes like so, but I figured, hey, I will think of something silly. I came up with this idea that every first snare hit of every measure will always change its place. So what we will have to do is have this note's value, so it becomes an eighth note. Mind you that it's not changing its position, it just becomes half its former length. So we can fit a snare drum hit right here. In the second measure, it shifts by 1/8 note. The third measure, it once again shifts with 1/8 note. And when we switch to 4/4, the same pattern continues. Once again, it shifts with 1/8 note. So it gets to this position. And well, we are done. Let's hear how it sounds once again. What I really like about this groove is the China placement, how it gives the whole thing this unstable vibe, as well as the snare drum hits that always change their places. I hope I succeeded in explaining everything, and I hope that this will encourage you to come up with similar stupid drum grooves. May the kind-hearted hedgehog be with you on your journey.